We've got a lot of church crime news to talk about. There's been a lot of crime at churches in the past week. We've got a priest that was attacked in his rectory. We've got a pastor that was caught downloading again nude pictures of a congregant's wife. We're going to talk about that. And with everything that we talk about, we always talk about how to avoid something like this occurring in your church. We also have to start off with a terror update. As you know, we are at a severe risk or an imminent risk of attack through terrorism in the United States at our churches and our synagogues. We're going to go do a deep dive into the latest intelligence that I've seen come out over the past week. It is going to be a spicy next 4 weeks and probably up through January 20th. So we're going to go through all the terrorism updates. We're going to talk about all the crime that's occurred. If you are new to the channel, we talk everything about church safety on this channel. We talk not only about church safety, but we give you free training and a free newsletter. The newsletter comes out at least twice a week where we talk about crime like this. Every Saturday, we put out a bulletin about all the crime that occurred throughout the week at churches in the United States. And we give you some tips about how to avoid that crime. So head on over to christianwarriortraining.com and you can get that free newsletter. I don't spam you. I also give you free training, including use of force, situational awareness, de-escalation tactics, you name it. It's all free. It's my gift to you as a fellow follower of Christ. If you take the course, you can get a certificate of training, all free. If you want to support what I'm doing, get a paid subscription to the newsletter at christianwarriortraining.com. Every Wednesday, I put out a training topic for everybody that we can discuss, and hopefully you can learn more about tactics, intelligence, everything you need to know to keep your church safe. First and foremost, let's start off with our intelligence update with terrorism. We are at a severe risk or an imminent risk of attacking the United States. Now, according to my sources that work in joint terrorism task force teams, we can expect to maintain this level until the inauguration. The biggest chances of an incident, however, are from now through November 5th when we go and vote. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Al-Qaeda 2.0. Al-Qaeda has basically evolved into a decentralized network known as Al-Qaeda 2.0, using regional affiliates to expand its reach in conflict zones like Syria, Yemen, and Somalia. Now, these groups exploit local instability to recruit and plan attacks, posing a growing threat to Western targets, including churches, which are often seen as a symbolic of Christianity and Western values. Now, Al-Qaeda has encouraged its followers to carry out low-cost, high-impact attacks like arson and bombings, which is going to potentially endanger our Christian churches in the United States and Europe. Now, with everything I talk about, I'll talk about the threat. So here, I'm reviewing an article from War on the Rocks about Al-Qaeda and what's going on with them. But I like to talk about my view of whatever article comes up. So here, Al-Qaeda 2.0, it is a serious threat for us. Now, under the leadership of bin Laden's son in Afghanistan, they're planning an even bigger event than 9/11. Now, they are training unabated due to our withdrawal from Afghanistan with the added benefit of the equipment and bases that we left behind. Now, many experts theorize that we're going to have an October 7th type attack here in the United States, and that's going to make Israel's event look like child's play. Now, many assess the risk of that happening are within the next few weeks to the next few months. Churches are at the top of that attack list. We're going to move on to Oklahoma, where an Afghan man in Oklahoma was charged with an election day terror plot. Now, an Afghan man living in Oklahoma who formerly worked as a security guard for the CIA in Afghanistan has been charged with plotting a terrorist attack on Election Day in the United States on behalf of ISIS. Now, the suspect, a 27-year-old who entered the United States on humanitarian parole after the 2021 U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan, is accused of conspiring to target large gatherings during Election Day with the intent to die as a martyr. Now, he was arrested after communicating his plans to an FBI informant and is charged with attempting to provide material support to ISIS and obtaining a firearm for a terrorism-related crime. The man reportedly became radicalized after he arrived here in the United States. Now, although he was going to do a martyrdom attack on election polls, many churches host polling stations. Now, many of my federal contacts have let me know that these types of cells are being intercepted with frequency right now. Now, I'm only going to publish ones that hit the news or come out in law enforcement sensitive bulletins. And basically, law enforcement sensitive bulletins, they go to the New York Times about an hour after law enforcement receives it. And they really don't tell us anything that they don't release to the press anyways. So just know I'm only going to put out vetted information from reliable sources. Now we're going to move on to crimes against persons. Now, I put out 2 videos on this. I put out a video about a man that worked church security in Texas that said 2 men with rifles tried to attack the church. He fired upon them and they fled. Turns out the next day he was caught in a lie, and it turns out the whole thing was fabricated. You can go back and look at my 2 videos on that. So basically, he made up this whole incident about potential terrorists attacking his church. Now, first and foremost, we have to pray for that man that made the false claim. He has a history of it, supposedly. I heard about another incident that he had been arrested for on a false police report. I just read that in the news somewhere, plus somebody from that area let me know about information of that. But we have to remember that we all want God to give us grace and mercy, but we tend not to do the same for others. Now, we are all disappointed about what happened because for some of us, it has set our efforts back at protecting our churches, and it made us look bad because we forward that information to our pastors, and the next day we had to recant it. It doesn't look good for us in our industry. The information that I use for my initial emails to all of you came from the sheriff's office and initial press stories, which all came from the church. Now, all of which, except maybe, of course, the press, are considered reliable sources. Now, just know that I never forward anything to you that is not already publicized, comes from a law enforcement press release or a bulletin, or comes firsthand from interviews from myself. As an example, talking directly to JTTF agents in the field dealing with the particular incidents that we're talking about. Now, I receive lots of secondhand information, which I never forward to you until it's confirmed, like I stated before. Now, in the meantime, it's important to vet our prospective security teams. And I talk at length about it in a video that I put up about this church security team member's arrest. You can go find it in the live section over at Christian Warrior Training on YouTube, or you can just go look at the newsletter that I'm sending out with this video. You can go over to ChristianWarriorTraining.com, look at this newsletter, and then see the link that will take you to the video where I talk about all the things that you can do to make sure that a false report like this doesn't happen at your church, which includes vetting your team members. If they had given him a thorough background check, they would have seen an arrest for providing false information to law enforcement previously, which of course would be a red flag. He may be good on the welcome team in greeting new people coming into the church, but as far as somebody that we have to rely upon for their reporting, that may not work out so well. So vetting is super important, those background checks that we do on everybody. If you want to know more about background checks, head over to ChristianWarriorTraining.com. I've got an article on how to do background checks on your people. All right, next up, we got a Catholic priest that's recovering after an attack at a rectory in Philadelphia. Now, a Maronite Catholic priest, Father Andrew L. is recovering from injuries after he was attacked at the rectory across from St. Maron Maronite Catholic Church in Philadelphia on the 2nd. Now, the assailant forced entry into the rectory by damaging the door and physically assaulting the priest before fleeing. El Tabshi, who suffered back pain and now requires a cane, expressed his resolve to protect his parish and seek justice, while also calling for prayers and forgiveness for his attacker. Now, Philadelphia Police Department is investigating the incident and charges are being pressed against the suspect. And I heard this from my pastor once before. I really agree with it. You really should be good at giving forgiveness. It doesn't mean the person escapes the consequences, but you can still forgive them and pray that they repent for their sins. Now, I don't have much more information on this incident besides just that initial press release, but I do want to remind everybody to have good situational awareness and to look out for pre-attack indicators. I have 2 great articles on situational awareness and pre-attack indicators, basically what people do before they punch you, hit you, strike you, shoot you, whatever. It's all over at ChristianWarriorTraining.com. It's free. Again, if you want to support me, do a paid subscription. It goes a long way in supporting what I'm doing. It's also a reminder to have a 4K video system in your church. Again, I don't know if that was an issue over at this particular church or not. It's just important so that way you can record crimes that occur, and you want 4K so that way you can identify facial features. It makes it a little bit easier for the police. And we're going to move on to York County. 53-year-old man from Glenville, Pennsylvania, was arrested after threatening churchgoers at 4 churches in York and Adams County on October 6. Police say the man, armed with a hammer, entered the churches during services using vulgar language and making threats. Now, at the Glen Rock Church of Christ, the pastor noted that the man entered without shirt or shoes, prompting security concerns. Now, the suspect, now in Adams County Prison, faces charges of terrorist threats, simple assault, and disorderly conduct. Authorities are still investigating his motives. Now, look, this is a great reminder about the need to have the Signal app. Now, the Signal app is text messaging that's secure. Now, what you're going to do is you're going to set up a Signal app group with all the churches in your area. Now, for me in the Treasure Valley of Idaho, we have a Signal group that's vetted that we only have security team leaders on for area churches. If something were to occur in one of our churches, we can send a text message out to everybody in the group and immediately alerts everybody. Happens at a second church, everybody knows right away. And then now you can start thinking, hey, we need to go heavy on the outside and maybe lock our doors because we got a guy with a hammer coming in to attack people. That Signal group has worked out wonders for us. Now, why do you want to do Signal versus regular text messaging? I use Signal because it's encrypted, end-to-end encryption, and nobody can see what we're talking about besides the people receiving the messages. If you send a text message, that's subpoenable, and the government could look at that. And yes, I am worried about my government lately. I am seeing search warrants written and subpoenas delivered for things that are not really a crime. And it really bothers me. Just ask the Catholics and what the FBI did to them very recently. Now, it's super important also that you take 2 classes that I offer for free. One is de-escalation tactics. It will teach you how to talk to somebody and how to calm them down and how to talk to them and work with them so that you can come to a peaceful resolution. Now, a reminder, it takes 2 people to de-escalate. If they don't want to de-escalate, you're not going to. But there are some good tips in here that help you try to calm somebody down. And saying calm down doesn't work. We give you some other tips and tricks, and it's worked for me over 30 years as a cop. Now, the second one is use of force. Self-defense is not a sin, and we're going to talk about this in the next story, I think. Self-defense isn't a sin, but it has to be proportional. And if you don't use proportional force, it could be a sin, right? And I've actually got an article coming out that I'm going to talk about whether self-defense is a sin and talk about both sides of the debate. Here, I talk about using force justly and ethically, and we're going to talk about different levels of force, when to use less lethal force, when to use lethal force. A man with a hammer coming into your church, not lethal yet, but it very quickly could be because that hammer is a lethal weapon. You may have some steps in there that you might want to try firsthand besides de-escalation. And so these 2 classes taken in conjunction with each other will really help you out. If you notice, it is absolutely free for you. My gift to you as a fellow follower of Christ. If you like the class and it helped you and you have means and you've given to your church, a subscription to Christian Warrior Training does help. All right, next up, we're going to revisit something that we talked about before. Now, there was a shooting at a West Fargo church, I want to say like last month. It was in August. And let's talk a little bit about that first. So basically, the community, West Fargo community, is reacting to the decision not to file charges against Don Barron, who fatally shot a 25-year-old outside of Prairie Heights Church in August. Now, according to the Cass County State's Attorney's Office, the shooting was ruled self-defense after Strom, reportedly claiming to be God, engaged in a physical altercation with a church member before Barron intervened. Now, Barron, he's a teacher at a West Fargo high school, shot Strom after repeated warnings to stop assaulting the other man. Now, while some residents supported the self-defense ruling, others argue that Barron acted excessively and could have handled the situation differently. Now, look, basically, you have a man with mental illness, goes to the church, has a mental break, assaults another congregant at the church. A man passing by sees that, jumps out, tries to intervene in the fight, doesn't work, so he shoots and kills the main assaulter. So this is clearly self-defense. However, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Now, yes, in this incident, you could use deadly force, but should you? No, you shouldn't. You want to be ready to deliver less lethal force, like pepper spray, baton strikes, a taser, something like that. And I want you to go back and take a look at that use of force class. That's going to help you decide when you should do that. If you haven't taken it yet, it's a good idea to get that done. You also need self-defense insurance. Now, I looked at all 11 major self-defense insurance companies, and for church security team members, that's all I was looking at was you as a church security team member that also carries concealed outside of church. Right to Bear was the best one. Now, I did not collaborate with anybody before doing this evaluation, but since I've come out and offered to everybody that Right to Bear was the best, and you can go back and look at my article on that where I break it all down, they have given you a code to get 10% off. They are already fairly cheap. I would go and look at Right to Bear. If you put in CWTID, which is Christian Warrior Training, Idaho, you'll get 10% off. It's a pretty good deal, just my 2 cents. But to not have insurance is not an option. And the other thing is, if you're only carrying a gun and nothing else, your only option is to shoot people. And that's not an option either, because 100% when you have an issue like this, they're going to say, what other means of force did you have available to you? And you'll say, nothing, my fists. And then you'll say, so you're only prepared to kill somebody. And a lot of you can bristle and say, oh, that's not right or whatever. That is reality. That is what happens in court all the time. I testify as an expert witness. That is the question I would be asking you. Now, if you're the man that was involved in that shooting and you're watching this, I am definitely not trying to slam you. You were working with what you had. I think that it was appropriate. I think you could have done things a little bit better, but that's hindsight. We need to learn from your incident so other people can find other resolutions. Now, would pepper spray, a baton strike, or something else would have worked on that man? We don't know. Probably not. The mental illness was pretty strong with him. And when people start thinking that God's communicating with them when they're possessed or mentally ill, it's really hard to deal with them. And it may have ended out in a shooting anyways, but we won't know. But for that man, if you want free training or you want some additional help, I'm totally willing to give you a hand. Just hit reply to my email and you can talk directly with me. Next up, we're going to talk about a Kenosha pastor that was arrested again for the second time for alleged possession of an intimate photo of a congregant's wife. This is the second time for him. Now, the pastor from Journey Church in Kenosha, Wisconsin, was arrested for a second time following allegations of possessing intimate photos of an individual without their consent. The pastor was previously accused by a couple of sending himself intimate photos of the wife during a church gathering at his home. Now faces additional charges after a second victim came forward. Kenosha police confirmed that evidence supporting these claims was found on his phone. Several electronic devices were seized during the investigation, and the church has cooperated with authorities while terminating the pastor's employment. The pastor had already posted bail after his initial arrest last month. They are continuing to look for additional victims. They probably will find some. Now, just like last week, because I profiled his previous arrest last week, this is a reminder to you to not keep any photos on your phone that you don't want your mom seeing or you don't want floating around on an X-rated website. If you loan your phone to somebody, make sure you keep an eye on what they're doing, even as a trusted person. I recommend you click that link. It is a very interesting story, to say the least. There's a lot more details in there that I can't go over on YouTube. Because it would break rule violations there. So go take a look at that. I do want to take a moment to talk about my chat. If you want to head on over and join my subscriber chat, people ask me questions. I try to answer them the best I can. And I am going to start doing live sessions over there just for subscribers, not over here on YouTube, just for my subscribers over on my Substack. Head over to christianwarriortraining.com. You can hit this newsletter and then go find join the chat, and you can join the rest of us talking about church security. Next up, we got a Kansas pastor that was accused of sexual assault of a disabled woman in Utah. Now, Ephraim Taylor Sr. is a 65-year-old pastor from Johnson County Church of Christ in Shawnee, Kansas, and he was arrested and charged with multiple serious crimes, including rape, forcible sodomy, aggravated kidnapping, and abuse of a vulnerable person. Now, the alleged incident occurred in Millard County, Utah, where a 22-year-old woman with an intellectual disability reported the assault on October 3rd. Now, investigators identified Taylor as the suspect through security footage and phone records. He has pleaded not guilty to the charges and is awaiting trial. Now, this is my weekly reminder that you need a strong policy to prevent incidents like this from occurring. There are multiple people that can develop policy for you. It's going to cost you around $400 to develop. I'm going to interview 2 people in the future that do this exact thing, that have some wonderful policy. All right, next up, we're going to move to arsons. A woman was arrested for setting fire outside of a church in North Carolina. Now, a 64-year-old woman was arrested after allegedly setting a bush on fire outside the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Elizabeth City, North Carolina on October 8th. Police responded to the scene after a witness reported seeing the woman start the fire and flee. She was located a few blocks away and charged with injury to real property and burning of churches. The motive behind the act remains unclear, and the incident is under investigation. The woman's being held on a $10,000 bond and is scheduled to appear in court. Now, thank goodness it was just a burning bush, pun intended. Now, make sure you have a fire alarm at your church, because she easily could have just lit the fire in the church, and that is really rough for your church to recover from. Now, last week, I went over and talked about vandalism that was occurring at an LA area church. But I recently found out that it was targeted by arsons on top of the vandalisms, and now there's a hate crime that's going into it. Now, I covered it last week, so I'm not going to go too much into it. Just know that some offensive graffiti was posted there. Here you got Chomo that was on a statue out front. I can't say what that is because of YouTube censorship, but you can go look up Chomo on the internet and it'll tell you exactly what it is. Now, this is continuing to occur at this church. Just make sure you have a fire alarm and a burglar alarm. Let me tell you why you want that burglar alarm with the fire alarm in the next story. The next arson occurred in Miami Gardens, and a suspect was charged with arson at a church. Now, that arson investigation is underway after a fire broke out at New Beginning Missionary Baptist Church in Miami Gardens, Florida, on October 6th. The fire caused extensive damage to the church's interior, including charred walls, floors, pews, and water damage equipment. Witnesses reported seeing 2 men dressed in black breaking into the church before lighting a fire. Now, Pastor Eric Raridan expressed a feeling of being violated by the incident, which occurred just before the church was to be vacated due to recent property sale. Now, if your church can afford it, you absolutely 100% need a burglar alarm and a fire alarm and that 4K video system. Now, if you can afford it, you need to put these in right now. When the dispatch center gets the call of a burglar alarm, it's immediately going to be followed by a fire alarm at that same address, and they're going to know that there's an arson occurring at that church, and you're going to get everybody right now. Now, you may have a fire at your church, but at least the fire department can minimize the damage, and police have a better chance of finding the suspect with a heads up from the alarm. Now, I talked to Colonel Grossman this week, and he is hosting his own safety seminar for houses of worship. This is going to be a 2-day or 3-day event. It's going to be April 24th to the 26th of next year. It's going to be a Thursday afternoon through a Saturday morning in Mount Vernon, Illinois, which is about 87 miles east of St. Louis. Now, the cost isn't out yet, but there is a really good lineup of instructors if you are able to attend. I would really recommend going to that. You can go to bulletproofworship.com. I have known Colonel Grossman for a very long time. Before I started doing church security training, I was teaching cops around the country how to do counter-narcotic tactics and SWAT tactics, and I would often pass Colonel Grossman at different cop conferences, and I've seen him speak a large number of times. He is a great speaker with some great information. I can only imagine that his conference is going to be even better. So head on over to bulletproofworship.com and get more information. All right, we're going to move on to property crimes. There was a vandalism at an LDS chapel in Santa Clara. Now, police in Santa Clara, Utah, not California, are seeking community assistance after vandals extensively graffitied a chapel owned by the LDS Church on Rachel Drive. The vandalism, which occurred between the night of October 3rd and early morning October 4th, included offensive graffiti on the chapel's exterior, retaining wall, glass entrance doors, and trailers parked in the lot. Nearby private homes were also targeted. The Santa Clara Irvins PD is asking anybody with information to give them a call. Now, look, this is your weekly reminder that you need a burglar and a fire alarm and a 4K video system. Don't know what else to tell you. I keep telling you every week. Many of you, including LDS churches, don't have burglar and fire alarms. We need to fix that. All right, next up, the Screven County Sheriff's Office is seeking your help in identifying this person. When you look at that photo, you can see why I'm telling you to get a 4K video system. Really hard to make out facial features, especially in his eyes. It kind of blends in right there, very grainy. That 4K video system really goes a long way. All right. That SO is asking for the public's assistance in identifying a suspect involved in a burglary in an, oh man, I can't say this. All the people in Georgia are going to correct me. Ogeechee Church of God in Screven County, Georgia. Now, the break-in occurred between September 30th and October 1st. Footage captured the suspect inside the church wearing a hoodie. The Scrivener County SO is asking for your help. If you can give them a call, again, we need that 4K video system. Next up, there was a $350,000 fraud case that led to 2 arrests at a Jersey City church. Now, 2 men from Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, have been arrested in connection with a $350,000 theft involving St. George and St. Shenandoah Coptic Church in Jersey City. Christopher Pope, 35, and Glenn Pope, 65, were taken into custody after an investigation by the Hudson County Prosecutor's Office revealed that their company, Centurion Companies, had been contracted for construction work at the church in 2021. Now, the pair allegedly falsified records to show payments to third-party contractors that were never made, while the church had already issued over $350,000 for these services. Both men have a court appearance. And we're going to move on to an international story. A Christian university student and 3 others were killed by Fulani herdsmen in an attack in Nigeria. Now, I read something recently that 90% of Christians murdered in the world are in Nigeria. And you'll see they are a weekly occurrence here. There's something like 4 every day killed in Nigeria. It's crazy. Now, 4 Christians were killed in 2 separate attacks by radical Fulani herdsmen in Benue State, Nigeria, including a university student, Solomon Kwanta, who was back in his village during a break from the University of Calabar. These attacks took place in October 9th and also at Shea Wende on October 3rd. Now, in addition to the fatalities, several others were injured and residents have been displaced as the herdsmen seized their ancestral lands. Now, local sources have expressed frustration with the Nigerian government's lack of intervention in the escalating violence, which is seen as part of a broader pattern targeting Christian communities in Nigeria. Now, I just recently spoke with a man that is working in Nigeria, and I'm trying to work something out where we can give you more information so that you can help all the Nigerian Christians that are being persecuted right now. So stay tuned for more information. Hopefully I'll get that information next week for you. There are 2 things I want you to do when we leave here. Number 1, or actually 3. Number 1, leave your church open and welcoming. Don't get that bunker mentality with your church. There's so much going on. It's very easy to leave here and want to turn your church into a bunker. Don't do that. It has to be welcoming. You just have to work harder as a church safety team specialist. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to pray unceasingly for the safety of you, your church, your congregants, and Christians worldwide. As the world gets more dangerous, we should be more excited knowing that our Lord and Savior is coming back to save us. All we're seeing right now is prophecy being fulfilled. After praying, the other thing I want you to do is to remember your ABCs. Always be caring.